Well, maybe having a family is an unfair privilege, and we want to deconstruct that. Philosopher Adam Smith put it this way. One way philosophers might think about solving the social justice problem would be by simply abolishing the family. If the family is this source of unfairness in society, then it looks plausible to think that if we abolished the family, there would be a more level playing field. People who are raised in a loving, two-parent, heterosexual, Christian home, and maybe in a middle-class setting or whatever, just the family even, just the institution of the family gives somebody an advantage in society. So if we want to level the playing field and have social justice once and for all, have no families, it will be fair for everybody. Like Winston Churchill famously said, capitalism is the unequal distribution of wealth, but socialism is the equal distribution of poverty. Any social justice agenda that's out there to try to bring everybody down is really just an effort to put the elite at the top and the masses beneath them. The social engineers can much more easily control a society of people from broken homes, economic despair, unintelligent, unthinking, docile populations raised by the media and the worldly schools. Sound like a nefarious agenda? That's exactly what it is. See the series called Schooled. You'll see that that's the open agenda there.
Our battle is not against flesh and blood. Our battle is against the principalities and powers of darkness.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents. We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
And the amazing thing is that they admit it, and actually they brag about it. So you're going to hear specifically from the mouths of the very founders of modern schooling themselves. They will tell you what the aim and purpose for modern schooling is.
You don't hear many people running around saying, yes, we're considering abolishing the family and doing what we can to undermine healthy, happy, loving families. That's a pretty rare thing to have somebody openly admit and come out and say really what's behind a lot of the agenda. Usually it's a sentence or a statement that sounds nice, like this one. It takes a village to raise a child. It's so heartwarming. It takes a village, as in It Takes a Village by Hillary Rodham Clinton. You have to peel beneath the surface a little bit. Take a listen to this quotation. It's not about supporting the family and the parents. No, it's about replacing the parents, getting the children very early in the system, in the state system. I've got the whole series called Schooled on this. Watch that series. It's about how they must replace the family with state education, so-called. But here's the statement from It Takes a Village. Imagine a country in which nearly all children between the ages of 3 and 5 attend preschool in sparkling classrooms with teachers recruited and trained as child care professionals. More than 90% of French children between ages 3 and 5 attend free or inexpensive preschools even before they reach the age of 3. Many of them are in full-day programs. So even before the traditional age of weaning, we're just snatching those children into the grasp and the clutches of the state from a very early age. The devil is behind this. He's the man behind the curtain, if you will. Even the nice smiling face of a political figure like Hillary Clinton, one might assume to be a benign and loving agenda. One might assume. But in case we have that naivety, I want to show you what it was that was behind the Clinton White House in the 1990s that was part of the inspiration for this book. Take a look at CNN. First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton held imaginary conversations, is what they call it, with Eleanor Roosevelt, who was dead at the time, and Mahatma Gandhi, as a therapeutic release, according to a new book written by Bob Woodward, says a report in Sunday's edition of the Chicago Sun-Times. The First Lady declined a personal advisor's suggestion that she address Jesus Christ, however. So she's having sessions where she's communicating with the dead, with Mahatma Gandhi, with Eleanor Roosevelt, but they say, hey, what about talking to Jesus? Oh no, I would not want to do that, she said. Woodward is an assistant managing editor at the Washington Post. Of course, Woodward is one of the ones that blew the lid off of the Watergate scandal. Woodward says the advisor was Jean Houston. So she's the spiritual advisor helping First Lady Hillary Clinton in the 1990s communicate with the dead, which they called imaginary conversations. We'll see in a minute there's more to it than that. But the article goes on and says, Jean Houston, co-director of the Foundation for Mind Research, he describes as a group that studies the psychic experience and altered and expanded consciousness. The book portrays Houston as an influential advisor who urged Mrs. Clinton to write her book, It Takes a Village, and in the process, virtually moved into the White House for days at a time to help with revisions, the Sun-Times reported. So who was the inspiration behind Hillary Clinton writing this book? A spiritualist. Who was the one who helped with editing it? A spiritualist. This book was all but channeled by the devil himself through a known practicing spiritualist who's into the psychic and altered states of consciousness, as they call it, where she leads Hillary Clinton to communicate with the dead. This is the woman, Jean Houston, behind It Takes a Village. Woodward suggests the White House hoped to keep Mrs. Clinton's relationship with Houston and her talks with the dead a secret. Yeah, no kidding. Most people in the White House did not know about Hillary's sessions with Houston. To some of the few who did, the meetings could trigger politically damaging comparisons to Nancy Reagan's use of astrology. So this is bipartisan. Nancy Reagan was criticized, and it came out that she was involved with astrology, another form of spiritualism. So that was from Bob Woodward, who's absolutely an impeccable investigative journalistic source on this. This is reported in the Sun-Times, this is reported in CNN, Washington Post. The New York Times also reported Dr. Houston has described herself as a sacred psychologist and global midwife who in 30 years of research, world travels, and practice has studied trances, hypnosis, and drugs as tools of therapy. Present at the session with Dr. Houston was Mary Catherine Battison, an anthropologist who considered the meeting a kind of meditation, reflection, or even prayer. Both women had been members of a group of self-help authors and leaders of the New Age human potential movement, invited by President and Mrs. Clinton to Camp David. In her column 2 weeks ago, written as the Woodward book was near publication, Mrs. Clinton herself noted, quote, I occasionally have what she calls imaginary conversations with Mrs. Roosevelt to try to figure out what she would do in my shoes. She usually responds by telling me to buck up, or at least to grow skin as thick as a rhinoceros. So you heard, she hears back from Eleanor Roosevelt. You might say, well, that's an imaginary little psychobabble type of exercise that's not anything. Well, you heard that they view this as prayer and meditation. This is a psychic thing. This is about trances. These women are not into just let's do a pretend thing on a secular level here. No, I'm a global midwife. I mean, you couldn't hear more spiritualism than what you heard, the New Age self-realization movement of the 70s. This is what these women came out of, the Battison lady and the Houston lady. So that was clear enough. But it got even more clear in 2012 on the campaign trail when Bill Clinton admitted this on tape, in video, in a public speech about what Hillary Clinton had been doing and how they actually do have knowledge from Eleanor Roosevelt, actual knowledge from Eleanor Roosevelt. Listen to what Bill Clinton said about it.
And a special thanks to the members of the Roosevelt family who are here, and to one who is not, Eleanor, who made sure that the four freedoms were included in the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948.
How do you know that Eleanor thought that, Mr. President Clinton?
I know that because, as all of you famously learned when I served as president, my wife, now the Secretary of State, was known to commune with Eleanor on a regular basis. And so she called me last night on her way home from Peru to remind me to say that Eleanor had talked to her.
Now, by the way, Bill Clinton referred to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. That very same Declaration of Human Rights says the following: elementary education shall be compulsory. That means forced. So, parents, did you hear that? Your freedom, you have the UN Declaration of Freedoms and Rights, you have the freedom, the right to be forced to put your children in the elementary schools of this age, beginning at age 5, to be raised from thence by the state. Now, of course, not just 5, because in It Takes a Village, the book we just read, all children age 3 to 5 ought to be in programs, and in fact, even before age 3 in many cases. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says the following: the child shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, or in the form of art, or through any other media of the child's choice. So did you hear that? Again, parents, the one world government institution known as the United Nations has declared in its UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which most of the nations of the world have ratified. The United States has not. But the declaration is that children in this world, irrespective of what their parents might think, have the right to access whatever media they want, whatever information they want, and to disseminate any information, media, art form, whatever you want to call it. They have total freedom to do whatever they want. Parents might say, no, we've got some boundaries on the kinds of ideas and videos and books that our children are exposed to. Not under this Luciferian agenda to disrupt and destroy and tear down the family. And the devil is so evil, he goes after the most precious and innocent and vulnerable in the society, of course being the children. Take a look at this statue that was erected in Detroit, the largest public satanic ceremony in history. Notice, it's children looking up in admiration at the goat god Baphomet and this satanic idol. The children looking up. What a symbolic gesture by the satanic community. What the devil is up to, trying to bring the children to behold him instead of beholding the Lamb of God. Instead of being in the midst of their parents, here they are at the feet and at the knee of this disgusting image. It Takes a Village by Hillary Rodham Clinton. And if you doubt those phrases to describe, to his uses of how we would describe this, I want you to hear it straight from a top globalist himself with the name Rockefeller. Of course, we know that name. Nick Rockefeller had a friend who was about to die, went on the record. You've seen clips of him before in this series. His name was Aaron Russo. He was a political advocate, a political activist, and a filmmaker, and a big guy in the entertainment industry. And so not to endorse all those things, but he's a source here, and a very valid source, because he had a personal friendship with one Nick Rockefeller, learned a whole lot about the globalist plan. And here's what he had to say about the family.
Well, one of the things they told me was that he was at the house one night, and we were talking, and he started laughing. He said, "Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about?" And I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, you know? And he started to laugh. He said, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Why am I an idiot?" He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded women's lib, you know? And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, "And you want to know why?" He says, "There were two primary reasons." And they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up the family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school, as the officials, as their family, not as the parents teaching them. And so those are the two primary reasons for women's lib, which I thought up to that point was a noble thing. You know, when I saw their intentions behind it, where they were coming from when they created it, the thought of it, I saw the evil behind what I thought was a noble venture.
Aaron, did you know that Gloria Steinem, in one of her own books, now admits the CIA funded Miss Magazine?
No, I had no idea about that. No, I never heard that.
Yeah, we're going to...
CIA funded Miss Magazine?
Funded Miss Magazine with the stated goal of taxing women and breaking up the family.
No kidding.
This program of social engineering is not new. This goes back a long time. Writers like Bertrand Russell said that we're going to look at even diet, injections, and injunctions, and these will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs in the young that the authorities consider desirable. And any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. That's called a totalitarian grip on the minds of the up-and-coming generation. Through diet, remember, we're going to be taking a look at the diets of the families with the constant monitoring and the home visits. Through injections, so you've got the medical, you've got the dietary, and injunctions. There's what's happening in the schools. The injunctions meaning orders, rules, etc., the order that's imposed there to create docility, perfect thoughtlessness, as Bertrand Russell said, the Jesuit system of education does in our public system today. If you didn't know what I just said there about the Jesuit system of education, that very much links into prophecy here, but that's in a previous seminar called School, so I won't get into that right now. But speaking of parental rights, take a look at this one from your newswire. Court takes child from mother after she mentions chemtrails at school. A Boulder, Colorado judge has removed a child from her mother's care because the mother believes chemtrails are being sprayed into the atmosphere, court documents reveal. The mother says, "I can now only see my daughter with a Social Security worker," she means a social worker, "standing over me taking notes." And the judge said this was so that if I mention chemtrails, they would put a stop to that. What? I mean, we've got a session actually where we look at geoengineering and this issue, but this is a belief that people have. Do you not have a right to have that belief that there aluminum dioxide and barium salts being sprayed in the atmosphere to reflect the sun's rays, and that's a program that's been proposed? Might sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, but they take the daughter away. They take the child. You may not believe this, and if you do, say anything about it. We're only going to have you with her in our presence, and we will shut it down if you dare mention such a thing, because you are radicalizing her into a cult ideology or whatever they might say about it. You've seen that they're redefining things as mental health conditions, which is just human freedom of the mind. This is reminiscent also of the Zimmer family in New Jersey and the Nogler family in Kentucky, and they were both harassed literally for homeschooling, for being against vaccinations, for living an off-grid, rural, country living lifestyle. They were called part of a fringe culture who were questioning this status quo. The father was interrogated by CPS because he insisted on filtering the tap water and feeding his children organic food. Non-vaxxing parents, register your child with the state. Colorado sends non-vaccinating parents illegal order to register their children with the state. Parents face court action for removing children from gay history lessons. So are you starting to get the picture? If you don't want your children indoctrinated into the LGBT agenda, if you don't believe in vaccinations, if you think there's such a thing as geoengineering, if you want to live off-grid and homeschool and filter your water and eat organic food, all of this, you're some sort of radical, extremist, non-mainstream person. We're coming after families like that. This isn't super widespread yet, but it's starting. It's underway and could snowball very quickly if that DHS or the Department of Health and Human Services Department of Education document were to become enacted policy. You would see this sort of thing really coming under fire. And of course, there's other examples like the mom who was charged for abusing her kids for completely normal behavior. Her children missed the school bus and she said, "You're walking to school 3 miles. I'm going to be in the car. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll be driving slowly there near you." That's a pretty good consequence. The kids are never going to miss the school bus again. They had to walk for 3 miles? This is child abuse. They arrested the mother. They charged her for abusing the children, for doing something that was good parenting. That, my friends, is a shame. Normal behavior even, that isn't part of, what they could say is some sort of conspiracy fringe, like people that believe in chemtrails and whatever, as if that should be illegal to believe in that. But now we have completely normal, mainstream stuff, like mom says you're walking to school then. That's good parenting. Or this mom who had her 4-year-old playing in the playground 120 feet from her home within gated community. After repeating the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy 5, God says something very specific and very important to parents. Take a listen. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words," the commandments, "which I command thee this day, shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." And it goes on, establishing the family as that precious religious institution of society, whereby the commandments of God and the truths of the Holy Scriptures are passed on to the next generation. Now, we know that we're in the time of the last days, a time of deception. The devil is the deceiver who's gone down with great wrath, for he knows that his time is short, and he deceiveth the whole world. The whole world will wonder after the beast. And so, in order to succeed in that, we know for certain that there will be an attack on the family. After all, that was the devil's attack at the time of Pharaoh, when Israel was about to be taken out into the promised land. Throw all the babies into the Nile. At the time of Jesus, when he came with the climax of truth, representing the character of the Father in human flesh, overcoming on all points, being tempted just as we are, and most importantly of all, sacrificing all at the cross to pay the penalty for our sins. When Jesus came to this earth, it was also Herod, a king, an evil king at that time, who put out the edict and the command to kill every child in and around Bethlehem 2 years old or younger. So the devil's attack is commonly upon the children during important times in the history of redemption. Here we stand at the climax of it all. Do you expect the same? Absolutely, we would expect the same, especially given what God has prophesied in Malachi about the children and the family. In Malachi 4 it says, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness rise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. So the context here is the final retribution, the final annihilation of wickedness, when Jesus comes again and destroys those who are not right with God, and they are consumed by the brightness of his coming, because God is love, and love is like a fire, the Bible says, and our God is a consuming fire to sin and selfishness wherever found. And so the context is that future event, and it said, notice especially the commandments in verse 4. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him. And then watch this. There's a connection again between the commandments and the institution of the family. Verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite them with a curse. So what will God be doing in the last days? Restoring the family, turning the hearts of the fathers and the children once again toward one another, where the devil is seeking to break apart and destroy the family, even annihilate the lives of children, as we're going to see in this session. This is a majorly prophetic moment in human history around the institution of the family, as we've seen here. But it also says in Luke chapter 12, for from henceforth there shall be 5 in one household divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. The father shall be divided against the son, and the son against the father, the mother against the daughter, and the daughter against the mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And Jesus said also to the people, when ye see a cloud rise out of the west, straightway ye say, there cometh a shower, and so it is. And when ye see the south wind blow, ye say, there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. Ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it that ye do not discern this time? The signs of the times are all around us. The attack upon the family is just one other of the many signs that we're studying in this series.
We have the state mandating religious matters to the people in the last days in Revelation 13. So this system is being built through the schools of the world. To quote him, through the schools of the world, we will disseminate this new conception of government, one that will postulate a need for scientific control and embrace all the activities of men.
In fact, there is an effort to enslave the family under the auspices of the scientific dictatorship, as they call themselves. Bertrand Russell used that term, the scientific dictatorship. Take a look at this. The Stasi, spying on children. It's an Orwellian new scheme. A state snooper for every child in Scotland, compiling a dossier on their family life. And it has chilling implications for us all. Now that headline, you might say, is a bit of a shocker. It's kind of an alarming headline because it was an alarming news story. Scotland literally announced that they would have a named person, a state official, as a shadow parent to be the background and snooper and accountability for every family. That's the kind of thing that these social engineers love to have. This is Reason.com. Every child in Scotland to be supervised by state-appointed busybody. You might say that could never happen in America. Well, maybe not at that scale, but EAG News reported a federal task force is recommending pediatricians and family doctors screen all students over 12 years old regularly for depression and issue prescriptions or treatment as necessary. You might say, well, of course, that sounds like a good thing. We can help kids who are struggling with depression, but keep in mind that if you have universal mental health screenings, which that was proposed also, 2004, 2005, something like that, during the Bush White House, to have what they call the New Freedom Initiative, universal compulsory national health screenings, mental health screenings. When you hear mental health, don't think just from an altruistic perspective what most normal human beings would say. We want people to not struggle with depression and anxiety and all of these things. You have to also understand how they define mental health and what kind of brave new world we're moving into. Listen to this from Oxford University researcher Dr. Kathleen Taylor. She said, in response to a question about the future of neuroscience, one of the surprises may be to see people with certain beliefs as people who can be treated. So she's talking about this from a psychiatric standpoint. People with certain beliefs will need to have psychiatric treatment? What is she talking about? Someone who has, for example, become radicalized to a cult ideology, we might stop seeing that as a personal choice that they have chosen as a result of pure free will. And we may start treating it as some kind of mental disturbance. In many ways, it could be a very positive thing because there are no doubt beliefs in our society that do a lot of damage. You might say, that's impossible. There's no way that, well, it does sound crazy and impossible that they would actually criminalize somebody's religious beliefs to the point what we've seen in other sessions that it becomes hate and so on and so forth. But then in this case, actually, you would categorize it as a psychiatric disorder. You would make it a clinical issue in addition to a criminal issue. And this has taken place in Norway. Norway officials place children seized from parents over Christian indoctrination up for adoption. Yes, you heard that right. The social services in the nation of Norway seized the 5 children of this conservative Christian family, and they said, this is unacceptable, the way that these children are being raised. Their grandmother believes in God's judgments, and these parents actually punish their children, and the children are singing hymns in the secular school, and they're independent-minded in this regard, and in their faith. They have been indoctrinated with Christianity. They said it's Christian indoctrination was the accusation here. And they started putting the children up for adoption. There was a global outcry because this went viral on the internet. People went to bat for this family and really raised their voices against this kidnapping and this terrible thing that was destroying this family. And so they did get their kids back. Praise the Lord for that. But what a nail-biting story that was to follow, because what you're seeing here is Kathleen Taylor saying, we might have to start viewing this as a mental disturbance, somebody who's got a certain religious viewpoint, or, as we saw in the other session, as a hate issue. In Germany, take a look at this one from the German magazine Baby and Family. They warn about right-wing families, or what they call right, meaning people that are conservative in their religious and or political viewpoints. And in the article, this is in German, so some of the language translates funny with the automatic translate on Google, but Epoch Times reported on this, that in the German publication, Baby and Family, the idea is you've got to watch out for conservative families because they can be just as dangerous as skinheads and neo-Nazis. Yes, you heard that right. Listen, they say watch out for unobtrusive, blonde, nice, dedicated children. That is the portrait of a potential right-wing family. You don't want to be allowing this in your daycares, and they're warning about this in the institutions where these families can have an influence on others. You read the following. First of all, they, meaning the potential dangerous extremists we're talking about here. They are nice and committed, says Michaela Kotig, sociologist and right-wing extremist researcher at Frankfurt University of Applied Sciences. She's describing the characteristics of alleged right-wing families. Characteristics of right children: obedient and still, with braids and skirts. It goes on in the article, and it says that these children, one of their characteristics is that they are self-confident. Now, that's the kind of child I would love to have. You know, I was a teacher, and kids that are dressed nicely and properly. Maybe the young lady is wearing a skirt and her hair is done in a tidy manner, or they're polite, they're nice, they're self-confident, they're very obedient, and they sit still well. Watch out for these children. They are from dangerous, potentially extremist families. What? So I don't know what to make of this crazy brave new world we're living in, but you heard it right in the Scotland situation that there is an effort to be snooping on families to identify who might be doing Christian indoctrination, who might be putting these children into a mental health state of being a cult ideology, which from a secular person's standpoint, anybody who truly believes in the Bible is, you believe in a fundamental interpretation of the scriptures. Fundamentalists, according to the Pope, are violent. And so you're hearing this from all sides. You got to bring all the sessions of Second Beast Rising together and understand that there is a target upon God's people already even now. Now, when you see the U.S. government document that was put out, this one is absolutely chilling. In fact, it's not just a document. The Ninth Circuit Court ruled that there is no fundamental right of parents to be the exclusive provider of information regarding sexual matters to their children. Parents have no due process or privacy right to override the determinations of public schools as to the information to which their children will be exposed while enrolled as students. So that's the law in the United States, that parents have no exclusive right to educate their children as it relates to sexual matters, in contradiction with what the public schools are trying to accomplish. So at that point, you're going, okay, maybe we'll just homeschool our children or put them in a good Christian school at the proper age that has true education principles that's going to help train them according to the Lord's blueprint. And absolutely, I want to affirm and promote that heavily. But there is, coming from the other side, an effort, of course, to undermine that. So take a look at this document. It's called the Draft Policy Statement on Family Engagement from the Early Years to the Early Grades. You see, getting the children at age 5 is not early enough. The state has said to themselves, how can we engage parents and families, and have family engagement where we are forming what they call a relationship with, this says that in the document, a relationship between the officials and the parents from a very early age. The goal here, of course, is that they would then build momentum for continuous family engagement from early childhood settings into elementary school. You see elsewhere in the document that the goal here is preparing children for school, transitioning them to kindergarten. Of course, fostering positive attitudes toward school. You see, we've got too many homeschool families, too many people who are opposed to this system and viewing this system as harmful to children. We have to help the young children and the families have a positive attitude toward state education. What else do you see in this horrifying document? Parents of small children will be informed and inducted into the school's ideas of learning goals, curriculum, assessment, instructional approaches. So in other words, school is encroaching earlier and earlier here. Not that they're going to get the Hillary Clinton dream of having children before they're 3 in the custody and in the programs of the state, but the idea is we're going to go into the homes. Watch this. They say we will actually conduct periodic home visits. This is a policy statement. This is a directive down to the county level, school districts, social services, etc., down to the states. This is a federal document from the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education saying we have a goal and a program to conduct periodic home visits engaging all children from the early years so we can transition them into the school years. And you might say, well, how early does this start? Age 3, age 2? Well, it says family engagement begins prenatally. Yes, you heard that right. And it sounds an awful lot like Mark Tucker in his letter to Hillary Clinton, congratulating her on her husband's victory, saying, I have just been meeting with David Rockefeller and we've got a great plan for the education of the youth. He said it's from cradle to grave and it's a standardized system for everyone. That's the program and the plan. But back to this document, Department of Health and Human Services and Education document, they promise that professionals and specialists and mental health consultants, there it is again, they will ensure constant monitoring of children's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. Constant monitoring of family wellness. Monitoring even nutritious food, as they define and dictate, of course, which reminds me of this UK Sun report, where parents who force vegan diets on their children may face 4 years in jail in Italy because it could leave them brain damaged. Parents who enforce a vegan or vegetarian diet on their children in Italy could soon be jailed for up to 4 years. Elvira Savino from Italy's center-right Forza Party says her bill would prevent radicalized diets from being imposed on youngsters. Vegetarian and vegan diets can lack, did you notice how they altered that but didn't fix their grammar? Zinc, iron, omega-3, and vitamin D and B12. They wanted to say vegan diets lack all these things, but then that's not actually correct and accurate. A vegan diet or a meat-eating diet can lack these things if all you're eating is junk food. French fries and soda pop is a vegan diet, technically. Vegan doesn't mean what you're eating. Vegan means what you're not eating. You're not eating animal products. But if you eat a wide variety of whole food, plant-based, awesome nutrition, you're going to get everything you need. Vitamin D comes from the sun anyway, so it's not something that meat eaters are going to be getting in abundance if they're living indoors all the time. And that's exactly where the state wants to put the children, of course, is indoors in classrooms all day practically. So there you have it. They're monitoring for nutritious food, which depends on whose definition of nutritious food we're going by. What else are they doing constant monitoring on? We saw emotional and behavioral needs. Now, again, all of this could be very altruistic. There's good people in the system. They're trying to help kids out. They're like, oh yeah, we want to help them with their behavioral needs and so on. But the nefarious agenda behind this is, whose definition of their emotional well-being and their behavioral needs are we going by? Are we going by the biblical standard of what God has asked us to do in our homes, or what the state believes our children ought to do? What the state believes our children ought to be doing academically at certain ages. I mean, there's a wide divergence between God's plans and man's plans that these even benign state institutions represent. Whether the actors themselves are nefarious or not, the agenda will then inherently be nefarious because it runs contrary to the Bible and to the spirit of prophecy. Then if any mental health difficulties or disabilities are identified, they will make appropriate referrals when families, quote, need help because they have a formal partnership with social services and mental health consultants. So the state is in charge of virtually everything regarding the children's development from prenatal period, it said, it begins prenatally on up through transitioning into school. And you might say, well, Scott, the document says that they're having an equal partnership between the state and the parents. And that is the terminology used, but is that the real belief here? Because notice that the document says that parents will be included. It says that the state is going to include families as partners in the, quote, equal partner arrangement. Now, if the state is doing the including and inviting of parents, who is the head in this relationship in their minds? Of course, the state. We're going to, we've got this. We've got the whole program laid out here. This is the system. This is the program. This is how we engage. This is how we are equal partners, and we will go ahead and include you and involve you in our program. This is not an equal partnership, my friends. In fact, you see in the news report from Mississippi House of Representatives passed a bill requiring teachers to grade parents. And that's just one example of the mindset of the social engineers. In loco parentis, in the place of the parents, is the doctrine and the legal justification for this. So we're going to go ahead and grade the parents. And last of all, in this document, then we can turn the page on it, because I know that this has been quite it's like a nightmare, right? It's a horror movie, what we're seeing develop before us with all this nice terminology. We're going to help kids. We're going to be doing periodic home visits. That we're going to do constant monitoring of children. Those are not benign ideas. Even if the people involved are trying to be nice, this is an intrusion on God's plan and program for the family. But last statement from the document, it says that they will implement evidence-based parenting interventions and, of course, refer families to social services as needed. And there's not a more dangerous institution to the family than the social services. This is Edward Ellsworth Ross, the founder, the writer of the book Social Control, and this was what he said about the family. He says, our goal here as the social engineers, as they call themselves, is to collect little plastic lumps of human dough from private households and shape them on the social kneading board. You see where I got the analogy from. We're shaping them on the social kneading board here, but we have to first collect them from their homes, because the family is going to get in the way of this great social experiment. The family is going to get in the way big time, because they can create individuals and help noble independence to form among the students and the children. This is how Arthur Calhoun put it. He said, here's what's happening. The process is the child passes more and more into the custody of community experts who are qualified to perform the complexer functions of parenthood. Wow, that's kind of creepy, I guess. Like, community experts, we will raise the children. We're going to get them at a very early age. Parents will take it from here, because we know this is too complex for God's institution of the family. In particular, said Elwood Cubberley, the attitude toward control of the child is likely to change. Each year, the child is coming to belong more to the state and less to the parent. The plea in defense that the child is my child will not be accepted much longer by society. Whew. Now, that was a prophetic statement, so to speak, because here we are now in a time where you hear broadcast on the cable news networks the idea that children don't belong to their parents. We need to get past the idea that children belong to their parents and belong to their families. We need to have a collective view of parenting. These are our children, say state officials on public broadcasting.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents. We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
Here we have a statement by Harold Rugg in The Great Technology in 1933. He wrote, we're going to build the scientific reconstruction of our whole social order. How do we do that? Well, we have to create a new public mind. A new public mind is to be created. How? Well, only by creating tens of millions of individual minds and welding them into a new social mind, singular mind. Through the schools of the world, we shall disseminate a new conception of government, one that will embrace all the activities of men, one that will postulate the need of scientific control.
So he says, we're going to bring in a new system here, and this is where we get into the last days. Because you know that in the last days, the whole world wanders after the beast, and the state even extends itself to legislating on matters of religious conscience. All the elements of human activity come under the purview of the totalitarian state. And how do you develop that? Well, you got to do it through the education system. You create their minds, you weld them into a new social mind, and you inculcate into that new social mind a new conception of the role of government. Instead of preserving liberty and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we have the state mandating religious matters to the people in the last days in Revelation 13. So this system is being built through the schools of the world. To quote him, through the schools of the world, we will disseminate this new conception of government, one that will postulate a need for scientific control and embrace all the activities of men.
This is a serious, actual news item occurrence that happened in our world, in my state. Homeschool Legal Defense Association, homeschoolers portrayed as terrorists. It's from the Muskegon Chronicle. Muskegon County officials want to be prepared in case the unthinkable happens here. And yes, it is unthinkable. So it was that 25 students found themselves crammed at odd angles into a school bus that had been turned onto its side Tuesday morning. This is a drill. This is an exercise for a terrorist event that the children are actors in. The scenario for the exercise on Durham Road near Holton Whitehall Road began after a domestic terrorist group exploded a bomb in the front of the bus. And yes, the domestic terrorist group in this fictional scenario was a group called Homeschoolers Against Public Education. They're portraying homeschoolers as terrorists in this exercise and in this drill. And HSLDA obviously was not happy about it. They put out a report saying, what is this? Homeschoolers as terrorists? Well, remember, they're not in the mainstream, and maybe they have a conspiratorial or cult worldview of some kind, and maybe they're doing Christian indoctrination. That's the new mindset. Maybe their children are nice, obedient, and they wear skirts. This could be a potential extremist group. On Monday, September 20, the Muskegon Chronicle reported on a Department of Homeland Security-sponsored terrorism drill involving the Muskegon Area Intermediate School District and the Muskegon County Emergency Services. A mock attack would occur on a public school bus. The simulated attack would come from a fictitious radical group called Wackos Against Schools and Education, who believed everyone should be homeschooled. We immediately called the Muskegon Chronicle, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association did, and explained how this is offensive to millions of people who have chosen to exercise their right to homeschool. Homeschoolers have never committed violent acts against public schools or any terrorist acts. Comparing us to the most dangerous people in the world is a terrible insult and a travesty. Now, they really only scratched the surface. This is not just offensive and an insult. This is about a systematic, as you've seen in this session, attack on not just the rights of parents, but the institution of the family itself. Will we, as the Bible says, have the hearts of the fathers and the sons turn to one to another, the restoration of the family? Will we push against this and say no to the intrusion and to the indoctrination and to the attempts at constant monitoring and warping the minds of the children in these last days? My friends, the children play a key role in presenting the final message, the gospel hope, the soon coming of Jesus Christ, the three angels' messages. We have the privilege as families of having a sacred shield around our homes to teach our children the way of the Lord. And if the world calls that extreme, and whatever term they're going to use to describe it, we will be libeled and slandered. We will be accused of being extremist, terrorist, cult, conspiracy. Come up with every name you can come up with. It's going to be hurled at God's people in the last days who are faithful and true to His message. And we want to do this in a loving, reasonable, clear, biblical, persuasive, and winsome way. You don't have to become some kind of, strange person to hold peculiar beliefs, but the Bible does say that we will be a peculiar people. And if we are not, if we're just melding in and merging in to the mainstream, if we are conforming to this world, this is not a good thing. That's the broad road to destruction. Let's get on that narrow road with our families, with our children, with tremendous joy and peace and fun and happiness in our homes with Jesus at the center. That's the kind of life God wants for each one of us as we prepare for being in the family in heaven. Unfortunately, Luke 12 is being fulfilled. Families are being divided, and it's not just state intrusions and these cultural tendencies. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. Sometimes we divide our homes for a lack of Christ, for a lack of solidarity one to another. It's time to get back in the Word of God, together as a family, morning and evening worship, the family altar, recreation together, time together, putting each other first, along with Jesus as our great head and God. We'll see you next time.